celebrated. He sees you as his son, and he runs to hold you in his arms. It was the heart of God on the scarlet sacred tree. It was the Son of God that died so you could see there is hope that lives beyond a grave. Throw off shame, put on praise, and run in grace. There is a righteous one who saw your need and took your place. Dance, child, dance in the love of God. Dance, child, dance, for your chains are gone. Throw off shame, put on praise, and run in grace. There is a righteous one who saw your need and took your place. Dance, child, dance in the love of God. Dance, child, dance, for your chains are gone. There is a king in Zion with mercy in his eyes. There is a king in Zion holding the keys to life. There is a king in Zion that sees you as the prize. When you were at your darkest, he breathed out light. Son and daughter, you are precious in his sight. Son and daughter, your past has lost its fight. Let it go, don't look back, just release it. Step into new life. It's a gift, so receive it. There is a whisper, and it's calling you. Throw off shame, put on praise, and run in grace. There is a righteous one who saw your need and took your place. Dance, child, dance in the love of God. Dance, child, dance, for your chains are gone. Throw off shame, put on praise, and run in grace. There is a righteous one who saw your need and took your place. Dance, child, dance in the love of God. Dance, child, dance, for your chains are gone. There is a king in Zion with mercy in his eyes. There is a king in Zion holding the keys to life. There is a king in Zion that sees you as the prize. When you were at your darkest, he breathed out light. There is a king in Zion with mercy in his eyes. There is a king in Zion holding the keys to life. There is a king in Zion that sees you as the prize. When you were at your darkest, he breathed out light.
The word became flesh, traded heaven's glory, Messiah of the mess. He is hope and forgiveness, shepherd of the restless, heals the brokenness. I surrender all I am to you, God, forever I am yours. The wonder of the cross holds the power of our peace. The Father's heart revealed on Calvary. Emmanuel, forever God with us. The world has never seen a greater love. given to us. Grace that never ends, truth that never bends. He is light in the darkness. For the lonely and the lost, He will always be enough. For the lonely and the lost, He will always be enough. Oh, the wonder of the cross holds the power of our peace. The Father's heart revealed in Calvary. Emmanuel, forever God with us. The world has never seen a greater love.
We love you, Jesus. We love you, Lord. Oh, we love you, Jesus. This is our story, and this is our song. Yeah. Sing it out now, this is our story. Sing it out now, this is our reason why. King Jesus, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. Sing it loud now, give Him all glory. Sing it loud now, this is our freedom cry. Forever, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. Sing it out now, this is our story. Sing it out now, this is our reason why. King Jesus, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. Sing it loud now, give Him all glory. Sing it loud now, this is our freedom cry. Forever, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. Sing it out now, this is our story. Sing it out now, this is our reason why. King Jesus, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. Sing it out now, give Him all glory. Sing it out now, this is our freedom cry. Forever, our Savior, the way, the truth, the life. The way, the truth, the life. The wonder of the cross holds the power of our peace. The Father's heart revealed in Calvary. Emmanuel, forever God with us. The world has never seen a greater love.
Weary traveler, beat down from the storms that you have weathered. Feels like this road just might go on forever. Carry on, you keep on giving, but every day this world just keeps on taking. Your tired heart is on the edge of breaking. Carry on, weary traveler, restless soul. You were never meant to walk this road alone. It'll all be worth it, so just hold on. You won't be weary long. No more searching, heaven's healing man's gonna find where all the hurt is. When Jesus calls, we'll lay down all our heavy burdens. Carry on, oh, weary traveler, restless soul. You were never meant to walk this road alone. It'll all be worth it, so just hold on. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long. No, you won't be weary long. You won't be weary long. Someday soon we're gonna make it home. 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 Gonna make it home. Weary traveler, restless soul. You were never meant to walk this road alone. It'll all be worth it, so just hold on. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long.
Good morning, happy Sunday, welcome to New Garden Online. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Jeff. I'm the lead minister at New Garden, and I'm so glad you're with us this morning. Now, we also meet in person at DuPont Tyler Middle School in Hermitage, and so you're always invited to join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. in person, but for those of you at home, we want to provide this online experience. This morning, we're in week 47 of our year-long series through the Bible. Long story short, we're going to be in the book of Acts. So if you have your Bible and you want to turn there, let's get into it. Good morning and welcome to week 47 in our year-long series through the Bible, Long Story Short. Now, if you've been following along with the reading plan, we are in the book of Acts. If you haven't been following along, you still have time to go to our website at newgarden.church/2021. You can download the reading plan, you can get the book overviews. We only have a few weeks left, but it's never too late to read the Bible, so I encourage you to read along with us. Now this morning I want to do something a little bit special. For those of us who maybe have read through the book of Acts before, or maybe you're reading through it right now, or even if you've never read it before, the folks over the Bible Project have done a great job putting it into some visuals for us. And so this morning, what I want to do is just spend some time watching their presentation of the book of Acts to get the big picture of what is going on with the early church. Now, after we watch this, we'll go straight into a song where you'll be invited to meet Jesus at the table. So let's watch this together.
One of the earliest accounts about Jesus of Nazareth, his life, death, and resurrection, was written by a man named Luke.
We know it as the Gospel of Luke, but Luke continued the story in a second volume,
Called the Book of Acts, and it's all about what Jesus continued to do after his resurrection.
Acts begins with the disciples who are hanging out with Jesus, who's just come back to life, which is mind-blowing to imagine.
And then for weeks, the risen Jesus kept teaching them about his upside-down kingdom, the new creation that he launched through his death and resurrection.
This is exciting stuff, and the disciples are ready to go tell the world.
But then Jesus tells them to wait and to stay in Jerusalem until they receive a new kind of power so they can be faithful witnesses to Jesus and his kingdom. Then he says that their mission is going to begin in Jerusalem, then move out to Judea and Samaria, and then from there out into the nations. It's like a roadmap for the whole book of Acts. Then the disciples saw Jesus enthroned as King of all creation.
So the disciples wait, wondering when this power is going to come. And then comes the time of Pentecost.
So this is an ancient Israelite festival. It's during the early summer, and thousands of Jewish pilgrims would come back to Jerusalem from all over the world, all these different languages and cultures colliding in the city.
And the disciples are together in a house, which is suddenly filled with rushing wind along with fire. The fire splinters off into tongues of fire hovering over people's heads. What's this all about?
Yeah, so Luke is tapping into a repeated Old Testament theme. When God's presence showed up similarly at Mount Sinai, he made a covenant with Israel and gave them the Ten Commandments. Then later, when God's glory came in a pillar of fire, it filled the tabernacle when he came to live among them.
That was just one pillar of fire, not many.
Exactly. Luke's making an important point here. This is God's personal temple presence, God's spirit that was foretold by Israel's prophets. And now it's come to take up residence in the new temple of Jesus' body, that is, his people. They've become little mobile temples where God now dwells.
And they start to tell stories about Jesus, but they're speaking in languages that they didn't know before, yet all the visitors can understand them. What's this all about?
Well, Peter gets up to explain that this is the fulfillment of Israel's hopes based on the scriptures. God's plan was always to use the unified family of Abraham to bring peace and justice to the world. But the tribes of Israel had been scattered because of the exile. Now here at Pentecost, representatives from all of the tribes come back together and they're introduced to their Messiah, the crucified and risen Jesus, so they can now become the restored people of Israel.
And thousands of them start following the way of Jesus.
Which brings us to Luke's tale of two temples. So you've got the temple that Herod built in Jerusalem, where Jesus' disciples worship like the rest of the Israelites. But now there's also Jesus' temple, which consists of people. This temple's meeting together in homes all over Jerusalem, and they were approaching life in a radical new way.
Right, think about it. Many of these pilgrims aren't even from Jerusalem, so they've formed these new families, and they're all depending on each other.
Yeah, people would sell their stuff, provide for the poor among them. They ate their meals together. They said their daily prayers together.
They were learning from the apostles what it meant to live as if Jesus is the true king of the world, and it must have been exhilarating.
But it wasn't all fun and games. Being God's temple is serious business, just like in the Old Testament. So you might know about that strange story in the book of Leviticus about two priests who disrespect God in the temple and then suddenly die. Well, Luke includes here a similar story of two disciples who dishonor God's spirit in this new temple, and they suffer a similar fate.
So there's corruption in the community. But the bigger problem is coming from the outside.
Yeah, from the other temple. Its leaders are threatened by this new messianic movement, And so they arrest the apostles, they try to stop them. And this brings us to the final story in the Jerusalem section of Acts. We're introduced to a new disciple, Stephen.
Oh yeah, Stephen. He's on fire. He steps up as a leader among the disciples to serve the poor, and he would go to the temple courts to teach people about the way of Jesus.
So the temple leaders arrest Stephen, and they find false witnesses to accuse him of dishonoring Moses and of being a terrorist who's threatening the temple.
In response, Stephen gives this powerful speech about how predictable this whole situation was.
Yeah, he retells the whole Old Testament story, highlighting characters like Joseph, Moses, and the prophets, people who are consistently rejected and persecuted by their own people. Israel's been resisting God's representatives for centuries, and so their rejection of Jesus and now of his followers is a rejection of God himself.
They get angry, and they start to execute him by picking up rocks and smashing him to death.
And as he's dying, he commits himself to the way of Jesus, to suffer because of the sins of others. He even cries out, "Lord, don't hold the sin against them."
This is basically what Jesus said at his death.
Exactly. Stephen becomes the first martyr of the Jesus movement, with many more to come. But this persecution contains seeds of hope, which is why Luke introduces us to a new character here, a religious leader named Saul. He stands over Stephen's dead body and even approves of the whole thing.
Wait, Saul, you mean the man who becomes the Apostle Paul?
Yes, Luke is showing how even this tragic murder can't stop Jesus' kingdom. And so many persecuted disciples scatter out of Jerusalem, and just as Jesus said, they head into Judea and Samaria. Now, the story of what happens there, that's what the next section of Acts is all about.
The scattered followers end up in surprising places, like Samaria, where their ancient enemies live.
Yeah, and Luke shows us how all of these unexpected people start following Jesus, like a sorcerer from Samaria who has to learn that the way of Jesus isn't about gaining power, but giving it up to serve others.
There's also a story about an Ethiopian delegate who, after discussing the scroll of the prophet Isaiah with Philip, decides to join the movement.
Yeah, Jesus is expanding his movement out into Judea and Samaria just like he said he would.
Which is great.
But back in Jerusalem, we meet Saul of Tarsus. He's part of the religious elite who oppose the new movement, and he's finding and arresting Jesus' followers anywhere he can.
This is a cruel guy.
But think about it from his perspective. In the past, Israel had turned away to other gods and to false prophets, leading to disaster. He believed he was protecting Israel and God's honor by getting rid of these people.
And then Saul hears that the movement spread north to Damascus, so he sets out there to find and arrest more followers.
And on the way, Saul has this sudden encounter with the risen Jesus himself. Jesus asks Saul why he's fighting against him. And then Jesus commissioned Saul to now represent him to Israel and to the nations.
And Saul is stunned and speechless.
And so he ends up in Damascus. But now he's announcing the good news about the Jesus he had just been attacking.
And no one saw this coming.
Totally. And the same goes for what happened next. Over in the port city of Caesarea, there was a Roman centurion named Cornelius, and he represents everything the Jewish people would hate about the Roman occupation.
An angel appears to him, and he tells him to call for a man named Peter. So Peter comes, and he finds Cornelius and his friends and his family all gathered together in his home.
Yeah, and this is scandalous. Jewish people don't enter a non-Jewish home to avoid ritual impurity.
So what's Peter gonna do?
Well, right before this, Peter had a vision. God brought to him a collection of animals that his people were forbidden to eat. And then God said to Peter, "Eat these."
And this is shocking to Peter. He says, "I've never eaten anything impure."
And God responds, "Don't call impure what I have made pure." And then that's it. The vision was over.
So Peter's gonna start a new diet?
No, he's an Israelite, and he's honored these customary food laws his entire life. The vision was preparing him for this moment of him standing among impure non-Israelites. And he realizes that God is declaring these people are a part of the family of Abraham.
And so Peter decides to stay and tell them about Jesus.
And the Holy Spirit shows up just as he did at Pentecost. But now it's for a Roman centurion and his non-Jewish family.
The movement is broken out.
And so back in Jerusalem, Peter is now telling the other apostles about what happened, and they start getting reports about even more non-Jewish people following Jesus up in the big trade city north called Antioch. So they send a man there named Barnabas to check things out.
Barnabas finds the Jesus movement alive and well in Antioch, and he finds it's made up of people from all over the world.
And so Barnabas recruits Saul to come and work with him in Antioch for a year. They're teaching, living among the people there, watching the movement grow.
The church in Antioch was the first international Jesus community, and it is where Jesus' followers were first called Christians, the Christ ones.
And so the way of Jesus was transformed from a group of Messianic Jews in Jerusalem into the multi-ethnic Jesus movement spreading through the world. Their faith was the same. It was centered on the good news about the crucified Jesus, who is the King of all nations.
But that message and their new way of life was confusing, even threatening, to the average Roman citizen living around them.
And the resulting conflict is what we'll explore next as this movement goes global, or as Jesus said, to the ends of the earth.
For some time, Paul's home base had been in the city of Antioch. And from there, he and his co-workers went out on 3 road trips, traveling by land and by sea to strategic cities throughout the empire.
In each city, Paul's custom was to go first to the Jewish synagogue where his people gathered. He'd start teaching and showing how the Messianic king promised in the Hebrew scriptures is Jesus of Nazareth.
And some believed this news, others didn't, and still others thought this message was so misleading and dangerous, they would incite riots to kick Paul out of town.
And so that's when Paul would take to the bustling city marketplace. He would set up shop there to make and sell leather tents to cover his travel expenses. And here, Paul kept sharing the news about the risen King Jesus with anybody who would listen.
He was often misunderstood as just promoting a new god. One time he prayed for a sick person, they were healed, and everyone around thought he must be a Greek god that came down to visit them.
But Paul insisted there's only one true God, and he was his servant. This message often stirred up opposition and more riots, and he got beaten, even thrown in jail.
Why such a strong reaction?
Well, the worship of the gods held together Roman culture. They believed the gods kept their cities safe, and the temple worship of the gods was a huge part of their economy. Paul wasn't just adding Jesus as a new god to the list, he was saying all other gods are powerless, even a sham.
So he's undermining their way of life.
Yes, and more than that. When Paul announced Jesus as a new king, he would call him Lord or Son of God, the very titles people used to refer to the Emperor of Rome.
So Paul's message could easily be heard as a threat against the entire political order. Why would anyone join this movement? I mean, it sounds dangerous.
Well, people were captivated by the story of Jesus and how his love created communities where all people were treated as equals, regardless of ethnicity, gender, or economic status. These people formed new families that would eat together. They lived sacrificially and took care of their poor.
They lived like Jesus actually was the king.
Right. And so in every city where Paul announced the message about Jesus, people were being transformed by God's Spirit to become new kinds of humans.
So Paul would stay in that city and teach them the way of Jesus.
And then he would leave for a new city.
This was a difficult life. Paul had to endure a lot of pain and a lot of suffering.
Yeah, and he did so because he believed that his own hardships were a reenactment of Jesus' suffering and death for others. He said it was God's own love that drove him to share the story of Jesus, no matter the cost.
After his 3rd road trip, Paul's reputation had grown. He had made many new friends, but had also made many new enemies that he would be wise to avoid.
But Paul didn't avoid them. His next stop was Jerusalem, a city full of people who wanted him arrested, even dead. And so why he goes to Jerusalem and what happens when he gets there, that's what the final section of Acts is all about.
Back in Jerusalem, where the movement began, the Jewish followers of Jesus were suffering from a drought and food shortage.
And Paul was so passionate about the church's unity that he began a major fundraising project among the diverse churches he had started. They would pool their money together so he and a group of representatives could take it as a relief gift to Jerusalem.
But it's not safe for Paul in Jerusalem. The Jewish leaders there dislike him so much, they want him dead.
And Paul knew he was walking into a trap. His friends all begged him not to go, but no one could stop him.
And why would Paul risk his life to bring this gift? Couldn't he have sent someone else?
Well, for Paul, this was personal. Jerusalem was where he used to participate in the murder of Jesus' followers, and now he gets to serve them. It's also where Jesus himself was executed, and so for Paul, it would be an honor to suffer there alongside his king.
Paul goes to Jerusalem, and as expected, he's found by his enemies. A mob forms, and they try to kill him. But Roman soldiers save his life by taking him into custody.
The Jewish leaders are accusing Paul of starting a revolt against Rome, but they can't prove it.
And the Romans don't know what to do with him.
Yeah, they can see Paul's not a criminal, but his claim that a crucified Jewish man is the risen king of the world, it keeps getting him into trouble.
And so Paul gets transferred from one court to another until he demands that his case be tried before the court of Caesar in Rome. And so they happily ship him off.
Now, throughout this section of Acts, Luke, the writer of the story, has portrayed Paul's trials and imprisonments so that they resemble his previous stories of Jesus' trials and imprisonment. Luke's making an important point. When the people of Jesus follow the way of Jesus, their stories will begin to look like his story, which is beautiful, but it also comes with a cost.
On the way to Rome, the boat carrying Paul is hit by a violent storm, and everyone freaks out.
Except for Paul. He's below deck hosting a meal, just like Jesus did the night before his trial. Paul blesses and then breaks the bread, promising that God is with them through this storm. And the next day, the ship hits and then breaks apart on the rocks, but everyone's washed safely ashore.
Which is amazing, but Paul's not out of trouble. He's taken to Rome and put under house arrest.
But it's not so bad. In his house, he can host groups of Jews and non-Jews, sharing with them the good news about Jesus, the risen king.
This is a bold move in Rome, the center of power where Caesar rules the world as king.
Yes, you have Jesus' alternative upside-down kingdom, now growing in the very heart of the world's most powerful empire, all through the suffering of a prisoner. And with this contrast between kingdoms, Luke ends his story.
That's a great image, but the story's supposed to be about this message spreading to the ends of the earth. So shouldn't it continue?
Of course, Luke has left the story open-ended on purpose, so that his readers would know that the story isn't over, and that they can participate in Jesus' kingdom that is still spreading to this day.
When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, shame no longer has a place to hide.
Hey, thanks again for being with us this morning. I hope you found this journey through the book of Acts encouraging, and it helps equip you to go be the church this week. I want to remind you that this Tuesday night we do have an online Bible study at 7 p.m. on Zoom. You can find that link at newgarden.church/chat. I hope to see you then. If not, have a great week, have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next Sunday.